Welcome to toy-polloi. No Legos were harmed in the making of this video.
Hello and welcome to another video from toy-polloi, and in today's video we're going to be looking at how to replace broken proton beams on vintage Kenner Real Ghostbusters figures. Now if you've watched my channel recently, you'll have seen I've done one video on how to repair some of the broken attachment parts of the proton packs. These seem to be very easy to break, and I spent quite a long time working out how to do it. So check out that video if you haven't already, because it was quite a challenge to get the proton packs actually sort of be able to be clipped back onto the figures and also held in their hands. Now since then I've actually picked up a couple more of these proton packs, and again in broken condition. You can see here that I've already started to repair them. I used exactly the same techniques that I showed in the first video, but as yet, as you can see, I haven't actually painted them. These are sort of work in progress, but as you can see on these ones, they are missing the proton beams. Now what they should look like is this. This is one of the reissue proton packs from the recent ones that Hasbro have done. You can see we have a beam coming out of the front, a little handle on the back, and when you turn the handle the beam rotates. But I'm guessing what happened with these original ones is that children got a little bit annoyed with the fact that these beams are constantly sort of stuck out of the front and out of the back, and just sort of broke them off, because I can't see any real reason why they would snap. The plastic used is very flexible, so unless you sort of really chewed it, it's not going to sort of come off. I'm thinking that mainly children just thought, I don't like these beams, I'll cut them off, because I've seen so many of them, not only with these handles broken but with the beams missing. And as you can see here, I've picked up a couple of other ones. This is another one that I'm sort of part way through fixing. Again, the beam is missing from front and back. It has been completely removed. Now normally if you see them in this sort of condition, you can actually get them fairly cheaply because no one really wants them. They're sort of no good for display. But that doesn't mean that they are worthless, because with a little bit of time and effort we can fix them up. So let's get on and we'll make a new proton beam for this vintage Real Ghostbusters proton pack. So we'll start by making the front part first, or the main beam, as that's probably the most sort of iconic piece that you need. They do sort of actually display okay without that back section, and a couple of the ones that you saw in that early shot didn't have this sort of rear section. So we'll do the beam first, but both pieces are going to be done using the same technique. And for this, what you'll need is some polystyrene rods. Now you can get these from most model shops. These are ideal for this sort of job, and they come in many sizes. These ones are a 2mm diameter, and they seem the sort of ideal size. I've used them for some other projects, which is why I've already got these in hand. And one of the rods looks like that. It's about sort of 30 centimeters long, something like that, and as I say, 2mm diameter. And the great thing about them is you can easily shape them. So what I've got here, this is, as I say, one of the reissue versions of the proton packs, and I'm going to use this as my sort of basis for working out the shape of it. Although really you could make them any shape you want. I'm going to try and sort of recreate this original one as best I can. So I'm going to sort of just roughly, I'm going to start in the middle because we'll trim the ends down. I just want to get the shape first, and once I've got that we can then trim them down. So you can see here, that's the shape we're going for, and this stuff really, you can just bend it. Some people like to warm it up in hot water, but for these sort of gentle curves like this, you can actually just bend it by hand. And you can see we can start to get quite a good bend straight away. If you bend it too far it will snap, but with a curve like this, it's so gentle, it's pretty straightforward to do, and within not very long time at all you can end up with something that starts to look like the shape of the original proton beam. So what I can do is bend this until I've got something that looks as close as I can get it, and then we'll cut it off, modify the ends and attach it to the pack. But this is the first sort of important part you want to do, is get the shape right. So there we go, that's a sort of a rough approximation of the shape. I'm going to modify it a bit later as I sort of carry on doing this, because you may want to change it as you go along. But that is the rough shape. So we can now trim off the bits we don't need. And I'm going to trim off this end. I've got a pair of plastic nippers here, so I'm just going to cut that end nice and flat. And then we want to trim the other end down so that it's about the same length, which I think is going to be about there. So again, I'll just trim this off. Now the end of this proton beam is slightly rounded, so I've just got myself a little file here, and I'm going to file this down. and just sort of gently sort of taper the end of it so that it's not a sort of clean cut. It doesn't have to be perfect, but obviously it's nice to get as close as we can to the original one. So I think that should be good enough, basically just sort of rounding the end just so it's not an obvious cut. So you can see that is the replacement beam. We need to do about the same for this end. Actually, it looks like that piece of plastic may just be about the right length. So I'm going to trim that down as well. I think that's about where it needs to cut, so I'll just cut it there. And again, the end of this is slightly rounded, so I'm going to round the end just a little bit. The sort of handle bit does have some more details. I'm not going to bother recreating those. It probably would be possible, but they've actually thinned this piece of plastic down really quite thin, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to get that sort of fine detail. So initially I'm just going to ignore that, and we'll get a little handle that is a plain handle. It maybe I can come back and add some more detail at a later date, but I think really just a plain handle will do the job. So let me round this end down, and then we'll see about how we go attaching this to the broken proton beam. Okay, so here are the two pieces ready. We have the beam and we have the little handle at the end. Now we need to work out a way to attach them onto the broken ends of this proton pack beam, and how we're going to do that is by using a paper clip. So I have just a normal metal paper clip here. What we've got to do, this is the sort of tricky part of this process, is drill a very small hole into the end of this piece here, and also a very small hole into the end of this piece here, and insert a piece of the paper clip. And we want to insert it about 1 centimetre so that it's got a nice sturdy fixing. Once those are all fitted, we then have to do the same on this piece, which is where it gets very tricky, because you've got to drill a hole in something that's actually slightly smaller than 2mm. But it is possible. I've done this already on one test version of this, so I know it can be done. First up though, let's drill the holes into these bits, because if this goes wrong we can always make another one of these. We've only got one proton pack to work on, so do these pieces first just so that you get fully practiced. And for drilling the hole we are going to be using a pin vise. So this is a small device that you can put in very small drill bits. I have a selection of drill bits here, as you can see, and I've picked one that is about the same diameter as this paper clip. In fact, if anything, it's a little bit smaller, because what I want is this to be quite snug when I push it into the hole on the sort of beam, so that it really does grip in. We are going to put some glue on it as well, but I want it to sort of have a bit of pressure and, you know, have the friction hold it together. So this is the drill bit I'm going to use, just slightly smaller than the diameter of this paper clip. And really you just got to go very slowly and drill into here. Make sure you sort of rest it on another surface or something like that, so you've got more control as to how you do it. I'm going to move my camera around because having the camera in the way doesn't help, and I'll see if I can get these two holes drilled, and I'll show you what they look like when I'm done. So there you go, you can see now just about there is a tiny hole in the end of the new proton beam, and that is just about big enough to put this paper clip in. It's actually quite a snug fit, but I will be gluing it just to make sure it really is held firmly in place. So I've got some super glue here, just a bit of Gorilla Glue. I'm going to drop a tiny amount of this on the end. Really just a small bit there. We can then push this into the newly drilled hole. Just make sure that goes in. There is a little bit of excess glue which I'll just wipe away. And then I can trim this off, because we're going to do the same thing to attach it to the proton pack. So I've got a pair of pliers here. I'm just going to cut that away. We need, again, just about 1 centimetre, not too much. But there you go, about that amount will do. We'll let that dry. I'm also going to glue this into the little handle that I've made. So again, just a tiny amount of this super glue on the end, like so. And we'll glue that one in place. And while that's all drying, we can go about getting the holes drilled into the proton pack, which is possibly the scariest thing you'll have to do, but it will be possible. So now it's time for the tricky part. We've got to drill a hole in that end and also in that end. Again, we're still going to be using the same size drill bit, so you don't need to change that, because we want the same sort of pressure when you push in the paperclip into this hole, just to grip it, because I'm not intending to actually glue it in this part. What I want is something that we can push in and it will work, and then if we want to take them out, you just have to sort of pull it out and it will still look like a proton gun, and this will be a separate piece that we can sort of take in and take out. So if you want to display them with the beam in place, you can. If you don't, you can remove it. So again, careful drilling. I'm just going to rest this on here. What we do need to do though this time is hold the little remaining piece of the proton beam so it doesn't spin around. So I've just got myself some of these little gripping scissors. I think they're called forceps. These ones don't have a massive amount of pressure on them. So what I'm going to do is just push those through the gap. It probably would have been easier to do with before I'd actually done all the fixes, but I should still be able to do it. I'll just push those in there, and then hopefully that will hold and stop that spinning. I'm going to rearrange the camera now and I'll drill these two holes. Okay, that wasn't so bad. I think because I've already had one go at this, I'm getting fairly confident with drilling these holes. So this is the little handle where you can see that pushes into the end there. Works quite nicely, and again, because it's sort of got quite amount of grip to it, that is actually very well sort of held in. We can now put the beam on the front again and just push that into the little hole like so. And now you can see we have a proton beam that works, but if we want to, we can just unplug it and then we're left with just a proton gun on its own. So I think this little technique actually works remarkably well. Next thing though, we've got to make these the right colour. Now this proton pack has an orange beam, so I'm going to sort out some orange paint. I'm also going to finish off these proton packs and give them a little bit of a coat of paint. I'm also going to make a yellow version. You can see this proton pack has a yellow beam, so we'll get both of these painted up, we'll get the beams done, and we can put it all together. Paint wise, you can use what you like. I don't actually have an orange paint in my sort of cupboard, so the yellow I'm going to be using is this Humble acrylic, which is either number 66 or number 99, I never know, and I'm going to mix that with some 238 red to make an orange that matches. And as for the blue parts of the proton pack, do check out my first video and you can see how I went about painting those. But really, you can use whatever paint you have to hand as long as it will give a sort of good match. Once these are all painted with these acrylics, I'm going to give them a top coat as well, of a sort of a clear acrylic top coat, just to give them the right sort of sheen and also to add a bit of sort of strength to the paint so it's not so easy to scratch off. But first up, I'm just going to mix these two colours together. I'll make an orange, we'll get the beams painted, and then get that painted and we can put them on the figure. The paint has now had time to dry, and as you can see, I've actually made the second Proton Beam for the yellow pack that I had, and everything is working quite nicely. So you can see I can spin this round and the Proton Beam spins really very forcefully, and the way these are held in place just using the bit of paper clip seems to give it quite a firm fitting. It's easy enough to remove them, so if you want to display it without the beam in place you can, and then you can slot those back in. Likewise, the orange one does the same. We can just remove that and plug it back in, and also the little handle on the back unplugs. So I'm very pleased with actually how this has worked out. It's not the trickiest of things to do. The worst bit really is just drilling the holes for where the paper clip goes in, because you've got to be very careful, but every other part of this process is really quite straightforward. Let's get these back on the figures. So there we have it. I now got all 4 of the Ghostbusters, all with working Proton packs. Make sure to check out the first video where I go through the full process of replacing the clips and making new little handles for them to hold. And obviously you've now got this video about making the new Proton Beams. It's certainly been a fun project. I do need to say a massive thank you to my good friend Jeremy from the YouTube channel Tokyo Toy, who put this challenge in front of me many years ago. I'm sorry it took so long to get it fixed up, but as you can see, I think it was worth the wait. I also need to say thank you to Philip Scott, who did a trade with me recently, and he traded me a couple of broken Proton packs and some other bits, so thanks to him for helping me out with the pieces that I needed. I hope this video has been of interest to you. If it has, then make sure to hit the subscribe button and tap the bell to be notified each time I upload a new video, and thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching toy-polloi. Subscribe for more great videos. You can also follow toy-polloi on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.